Alrighty, we are going to make our paint palette today. So I have a piece of clay here that is rolled out nice and evenly. This is called a slab. You'll notice all this texture right here from the plastic from keeping it wet and from the slab roller itself is the first thing I'm going to want to get rid of. So I got some water here. I'm just going to use my fingers to kind of rub it out because I want to get rid of that texture. And I only have to do this where I'm going to cut out my shape for my paint palette. So I don't really have to do it on both sides. I can if I want, but I don't mind having some texture on there. Notice I'm not pushing it down into the table because I don't want my slab to get stuck, because that very easily can happen on the table to ruin your piece of clay, and you're only going to get one piece of slab like this. So I'm just smoothing it out, a little bit of water, not a lot. If I use a lot of water, it will become really sticky and I won't be able to use my tracer that we made for our paint palette. All right, so that should about do it. I don't have to do everything because I know I'm not going to use this whole piece. As long as I can fit my tracer that I made. So I'm making a lemon maybe, or an orange. I'm not sure which color I'm going to make it yet. Maybe I'll just make it all white, but it's going to look like some kind of citrus. And I'm going to use my toothpick here to trace. And I'm pushing all the way through my clay slab so I can remove it. Just working kind of slowly. Oopsie, I went too far in. That's all right. Kind of readjust. Go all the way around. So this extra I can leave aside, or I can use it to maybe make the seeds in a little bit. So what I'm going to do, make sure it's not stuck. Okay, next thing is to smooth the edges. Now, I want to smooth them because once I let this dry and we fire it in the kiln, it'll come out and it'll be permanent. So if I leave these unsmooth edges or these sharp edges, they will actually be pretty sharp. They could cut me. So I want to smooth it out. Again, keeping that texture kind of nice and smooth. I can even look, now I can look at the bottom if I don't want this texture here at the bottom. Smooth corners are where it's at because I don't want it to be rough and cut me later. Now I don't mind this texture because that's going to be the bottom. So again, I'm not going to push it too hard into the table because I want to be able to pull it off. So I'm going to use my toothpick again, and I'm going to try and draw these lines on here. Another option would be to cut out each of these shapes and trace them on here. Now this time I'm not going to push all the way through because we're creating our paint palette, the sections where our paint's going to go. So I'm just going to lightly draw them. I'm not going all the way through my clay piece. Very important, because you want this section to be carved away to reveal a little divot so that you can then put your paint colors in there, your different paints. So I'm getting this as close as I can to this. It doesn't have to be exactly the same. And I'm drawing this so that I have little walls all the way around. So basically like a double line, if you will, parallel lines next to each other. Now I messed up a little there. I can come back and smooth it out. Try again. Just nice and light. I think I can fit one more little triangle slice. So whatever shape you're using, you can either just draw it right onto it, or you can cut these out and make a smaller tracer. Okay, so then I've got this, it's like a ribbon tool here. It's got like this little loop on the end. I'm going to use this to carve away. Again, I am not pushing all the way through. You do not want a hole because then it won't hold your paint. So I'm going to come through and carve out these pieces that I have drawn on here. Also, every so often, I'm going to pick up my paint palette because I want to make sure I'm not pushing too hard and pushing it into the table. Because again, if you push it really hard, it's going to get stuck. And then I can decide, how deep do I want this? Do I want it really shallow? Do I want it really deep to hold a lot more paint? Trying to clean these up. So I'm going to do this on every piece here. So it's not exactly pretty to begin with, but I have some tips for smoothing it out and making it more even here once we get all of these carved away. So again, I'm going to pick this up, make sure I'm not going too deep. Trying to get into all my corners of my triangles here. This triangle right here, this little corner is kind of hard. Okay, almost done here. Let's see. Okay, again, as I'm doing this, I'm not going too deep down into the clay because I do not want a hole through it. So this piece I had to smooth that back out because I want my walls or the edges here to be raised a bit so that they can keep my paint in my paint tray. Okay, so I got most of it carved away, revealing my paint palette or my paint tray here. Just gonna go around and tidy some of these up. And then another thing I want to do is take all these scraps because we can use it for other projects. I'm going to turn that into a ball that can be used later. Okay, I'm going to lift this up. I'm going to also use my water again, just like we did when we were getting rid of the texture. Now I'm going to go around and I'm going to smooth out all these edges so it's nice and uniform, so my paint doesn't get trapped in any of these weird ridges that I've created. Everything's nice and smooth because when I fire this, it's going to be permanent. So I want to get everything nice and smoothed out right now. Little bit of water, nothing crazy. If I get it too wet, it's going to go back into slip or very, very wet clay, which then becomes impossible to mold. Trying to get my little triangle pieces to be kind of nice and even. And this may take 1 or 2 art days. It's okay if you don't get it all done today. We can put it in plastic to keep it wet for you to form it next time too if you need to. All right, so I think I kind of got it how I want it. One last thing I was thinking of, because a lemon or a lime, sometimes they have little seeds. I might use this little extra piece to make a couple seeds that I want to add into my paint palette here. I'm going to get it a little wet. So then it's like a 3-dimensional part. So if you made something that had, you know, like a little bee or a little flower, you could add to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add just a bit of water because we can't use glue. So it's like, acts like the glue here. So these are my seeds inside my citrus here. Maybe one more, we'll do it in 3. So I'm just forming them, getting a little bit wet and placing it into my paint palette. So I have my citrus plant here. I noticed this is not as deep as I would want it to be, so I'm going to touch that up a bit. All right, and there you have it. I have a paint palette. So now we just have to wait for this to dry and be fired, and then we can add some glaze, maybe some colors, or we might just do it white or clear since we don't want it to distract from the paint colors we're going to add to our paint palette. So we'll have to see what kind of colors we come up with. All right, I can't wait to see your paint palettes.